Hi guys, Erin here. Today I'm using a technology called Screencast-O-Matic so that I can talk you through some things about the literature review that you're going to be writing while we're also looking at some stuff together on the screen. So the first thing I want to do is point out to you that the literature review is sort of a pivotal piece of our work in this course. And you may notice that the syllabus kind of gives you some hints about that. For example, it says that in the annotated bibliography, when you're writing that, you should be thinking about how you can use it to support your literature review. In the literature review section, I think it should say something about using the literature review to support your final paper. So the lit review is kind of a linchpin of the work that you're going to do in this course. And for that reason, it's important, I think, to spend some time talking about what it is, what it does, and also what it is not. So I want to direct you to what you're seeing on your screen right now, which is the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill's their Writing Center's actually page on literature reviews. It's a pretty extensive handout, by which I mean website, I guess. It calls itself a handout. So you should take a look at this, scroll through it. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but I do want to point out a few of the perhaps most important pieces. If you've written a literature review before, this really may be something of a review for you. If you haven't written a literature review before, then I really encourage you to take a long, hard look at this document because I think it will do a good job of preparing you. And as with everything in this course, if you're feeling nervous, I encourage you to work ahead, complete a draft early, and send it to me. I'm happy to review things for you as long as you give me enough time to do that and get it back to you before the deadline for the project. So one thing I do want to point out here is it tells you a little bit about what a literature review is, and then it says what it isn't, which I think is very important, and it's something I definitely want you to take from this class. So right here, you see that there's a question that says, how is a literature review different from an academic research paper? And then it answers it, so I want to talk about this a little bit. This page suggests that the main focus of an academic research paper is to develop a new argument. And in our case, it is to answer a research question, right? You're going to develop a research question. You're going to answer that question before you can really articulate an argument. Now, you probably already have a good idea of what your argument is going to be, but that argument should not be explicit at this point, right? So a research paper will contain a literature review. A literature review, in other words, is one piece of a research paper. The research paper uses the literature as a foundation and as support for a new insight that you contribute. So in other words, the literature review section is sort of parallel to your methodology, right? So remember, throughout this class, we've been talking about how we have different backgrounds, different experiential knowledges. This leads us to having different methodologies, different theories, and then built upon those different methodologies and theories are our methods, right? Our methods come out of those things. They're all kind of stacked. So when you're thinking about the lit review, be thinking about that methodology portion, right? You're reviewing literature, you're picking literature based on your worldview, your perspective, and you're developing a theory or an argument based on the literature that you've read. Notice the last sentence, the focus of a literature review is to summarize and synthesize the arguments and ideas of others without adding new contributions. So it will be tempting in your literature review, it will be really tempting to take a paragraph, summarize a source, and then explain how it supports your argument. Don't do that. You want your literature review to read very much like I hesitate to say a summary of sources because I don't want it just to be a bunch of paragraphs strung together about different sources. It has to have more organization, more cohesion than that. But it really should stick to more of a sort of a summary perspective rather than starting to become more evaluative, more including arguments. So when you are writing a lit review, just remember that you're not to that argument point yet, right? You'll be able to get there, and you should be thinking ahead about it, but you're not there yet. There is a little bit more information right down here, and I do encourage you to look at all of this even though I'm skipping around, where it talks you through organization. So it says first cover the basic categories, introduction, body, conclusions, or recommendations. And you definitely need to do that sort of work because that's the work that proves that you have done a comprehensive literature review on your subject. You know what you're talking about. You're establishing your ethos and your credibility there, right? So that's really important. But within that, there are a number of different ways that you can organize your materials, and they're going to depend on the materials you have and the way that you want your paper to make sense. In much of my work, because I'm working in feminism and technical communication, and that's not something that has a really long history, I often use chronological organization because it's doable, right? It's doable because it's a short time frame. Also because it helps It helps readers to understand the way these different theories have built upon each other over time, helps them to view this work more as a conversation rather than as some inaccessible literature. That's my bias, right? That's why I use a chronological organization a lot of the time. You may also use a thematic organization, particularly if you're weaving together a couple of different disciplines. It may be more useful to have a section where you're talking about the work you reviewed in anthropology and then come back to cultural studies and then look at technical communication. That may make more sense to you. I'm gonna dissuade you if I can from using a methodological approach, just because I think that's probably something that you might want to use later after you've already had some more practice doing this kind of thing. That's not to say you can't do it. If this is the way that makes sense to you, then go for it. But I'm going to encourage you to look a little bit more at the thematic or chronological options for this project. And if at any point you have questions about this, as always, please feel free to talk to me about it. I'm happy to have a conversation with you and help you work through it. So I'll end now, but in summary, I just wanted to alert you to this website, let you know that it's available, that it's a really good resource. There's a lot of good stuff in here, and I want you to be thinking ahead, right? I know I'm skipping ahead a little bit here. We have the annotated bibliography before you get to the literature review, but I do want you to be thinking about that literature review, because if it's on your mind, I think it's going to make your work in the annotated bib easier, and it's also going to make the transition between the two easier. So do keep it in mind as you're doing your work from here on out.